عیسیٰ تلک انبیاء تمام، ارے آدم سے لے کے عیسیٰ تلک یہ انبیاء تمام ہے، سب کو مانتا ہوں مگر مصطفیٰ کے بعد، میں سب کو مانتا ہوں مگر مصطفیٰ کے بعد، راہ خدا میں جس حسین و حسن دیے، راہ خدا میں جس نے حسین و حسن دیے، ہوگی نا ایسی ماں بھی کوئی فاطمہ کے بعد، مانا بہار خلد بھی ہے خوب تر مگر، مانا بہار خلد بھی ہے خوب تر مگر، اے شہر مصطفیٰ تیری آب و ہوا کے بعد، جچتا نہیں نظر میں، جچتا نہیں نظر میں کوئی مصطفیٰ کے بعد۔
الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين، والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين، فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى جل جلاله في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد، أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، وما خلقت الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون، ما أريد منهم من رزق وما أريد أن يطعمون، صدق الله العظيم وبلغنا رسوله النبي الأمين الكريم، ونحن على ذلك لمن الشاهدين والشاكرين، والحمد لله رب العالمين، إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي، يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما، اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم وصل عليه. Honorable elders, respectable brothers, beloved youngsters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Firstly, we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has bestowed upon us this opportunity to gather in this halaqah, which is a gathering of remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and of the remembrance of he whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remembers, which is the beloved Habib sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. So firstly, I'd just like to thank the WFIA social media team for their efforts in making these programs possible, for advertising the Naseeha sessions, by making the posters, and by arranging the live stream so that not only the people that are present here can gain and can benefit from the Naseeha that is delivered, but also the live stream can be streamed, inshallah, all around the world. So anyone sitting anywhere in the world can view it. So they're worthy of praise for this and for their efforts. Just to mention some names: Brother Ramzan, Brother Nasser Ramzan, Brother Sheikh Ibrahim, Sheikh Irfan. We've got Brother Sajid Bhatt, Brother Kamil, Brother Mansoor Ramzan, Brother Nasser, and Nadeem. If I left anyone out, I do apologize. But they're working very hard behind the scenes. You don't see this at the forefront, but behind the scenes a lot of effort is taken to ensure that these programs are made available, and also that they're going live every week. And also I'd like to thank generally the wider management committee that they have facilitated the hosting of these events and for these Naseeha programs that are inshallah benefiting the youth of our community and conveying Islam to them in the English language. I'd like to start with the hadith of Sunan al-Tirmidhi, in which Hazrat Imam Anas bin Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhu, Sahabi Rasul, he narrates that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, إِذَا مَرَرْتُمْ بِرِيَاضِ الْجَنَّةِ فَارْتَعُوا, meaning that when you pass by the meadows of praise or the meadows of paradise, then graze in them. So the Sahaba, the beholders of Nabi Kareem alayhi salatu wasalam, they asked, وَمَا رِيَاضُ الْجَنَّةِ, that Ya Rasulullah, what are the meadows of paradise? And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam replied, قَالَ هِلَقُ الذِّكْرِ. So he replied, the halakas of dhikr, meaning the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said where the remembrance is being held of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the gatherings, the circles where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his Habib sallallahu alayhi wa sallam are being mentioned, those are the halakas of dhikr. So when you pass by them, if you have the opportunity, then you should graze in them. And this is what we are doing today and every Wednesday when these meetings and these gatherings are held. So the ayah that I recited in the khutbah earlier today was وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, which means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran Kareem that we did not create jinn and mankind except for servitude and worship. So the primary purpose of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creating the jinn and the mankind was for his worship and servitude. And the next ayah is مَا أُرِيدُ مِنْهُمْ مِنْ رِزْقٍ وَمَا أُرِيدُ أَنْ يُطْعِمُونَ, which means that I do not want from them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, I do not want from them, meaning jinn and mankind, any provision, nor do I want them to feed me. So these two verses are from the Quranic Surah Zariyat, and they instill in us the philosophy, the Islamic philosophy of life, and the purpose of our life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is our creator, he is stating that this is the purpose of your creation. Much like when you purchase something, it comes with an instruction manual which informs you the purpose of that being, of that item. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, he created jinn. And he says to jinn and humankind in the Quran that your sole purpose of being created is that you worship me and that you, for servitude of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in another ayah in the Quran Kareem, in Surah Al-Qiyamah, verse 36, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَيَحْسَبُ الْإِنسَانُ أَنْ يُتْرَكَ سُدًى, that does man think that he will be left to wander without being questioned? So that I've created him, I've given him a purpose. Does he think that he will not be questioned about his purpose of his existence? That he will be left to wander without being questioned? So the verse, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, it teaches us that we have a purpose to our life, and that this life is not the destination, it is the journey to the destination. So this life merely is the journey, the destination is the hereafter. So the believer lives in the world, but he does not live for the world. And the Muslim lives this life, but he prepares for the afterlife, for the eternal life. So this is the philosophy of the mu'min, of the believer. So Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, who is a very famous Sufi poet and a mystic, he says in his Masnawi Sharif, which is written in the Farsi language, he says, Zindagi Amad Baraye Bandagi, Zindagi Be Bandagi Sharmin is very similar to the Urdu language. The Urdu language is a amalgamation of Arabic, Farsi, Sanskrit, Hindi. So a lot of words are very similar. So Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi rahmatullah alayhi says, Zindagi Ahmad Barai Bandagi, that life, Zindagi Ahmad comes into existence Barai Bandagi, for the servitude of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he says, Zindagi Be Bandagi Sharmindagi, that life, Zindagi Be Bandagi, without servitude of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Sharmindagi is an embarrassment. It's a pure humiliation. These are the sayings of Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi regarding the person who doesn't take part in what he has been created for. So regarding the ayah, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ, Imam Nawawi, who is a Shafi'i Imam, a very famous Imam, he's commented on a lot of hadith books. He says in Riyadh al-Salihin, which is a book of collection of our hadith that he collected, Sahih hadith from Muslim and Bukhari and other sources, but they are all Sahih narrations. He says in the Muqaddimah, which is the preface, the prologue to his book Riyadh al-Salihin, he says that this ayah, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, he says, هَذَا تَصْرِيحٌ بِأَنَّهُمْ خُلِقُوا لِلْعِبَادَةِ, that this verse is clear, it's unequivocal. Tasrih means clear. It's clear, unequivocal indication that humankind has been created lil-ibadah, for worship. And then he goes on to say, فَحَقَّ عَلَيْهِمْ الْإِعْتِنَاءُ بِمَا خُلِقُوا لَهُ. So it is incumbent, al-i'tina'u, which is incumbent alayhim, on the human, bima khuliqula, that they prepare, meaning the humankind, that they prepare, give their time and attention for that khuliqula, for which they have been created. And then he goes on to say, al-i'radu an huzuzid dunya bil-zahada, and that man, the human being, turns away from the fortunes of the world with asceticism. Zahada, zuhad means asceticism, which is self-discipline and or keeping away from worldly pleasures. So there are two things that Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi is saying that we need to do as the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Firstly, he's saying that we need to prepare for the purpose of our creation, which is servitude and worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And everything in this life comes under that. The main primary goal is the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And secondly, he says that we should then turn away from the fortunes or the portions or the pleasures of the world. And Imam Muhammad ibn Allah Shafi'i Makki, he's an Imam who writes a commentary on Imam Nawawi's Riyadh al-Salihin. And that commentary is called Dalil al-Falihin. In Dalil al-Falihin, Imam Muhammad ibn Allah Shafi'i says that Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, so also when I say the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's name, you should recite Durood aloud. You know Imam Malik bin Anas rahmatullahi alayhi, he's the Imam of the Maliki fiqh, Imam Malik bin Anas rahmatullahi alayhi. When he used to give dars of hadith, he'd employ a person to sit in the gathering specifically for the purpose of reciting Durood aloud when the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's name was mentioned. And then due to that person reciting aloud, the other people in the gathering would also recite it aloud. So Imam Malik would get all the benefit of this, and he'd actually pay someone to do it. So don't shy away from saying the Durood Sharif when Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's name is mentioned. Because not only will you get the benefit and the reward, any person that then imitates you and does the same, you also get the reward for their actions as well, inshallah. So I was saying, Imam Muhammad ibn Allah Makki Shafi'i rahmatullah alayhi, he says in his commentary, Dalil al-Falihin, he says that La haqqa libni adama illa fi thalatha. That Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, and this hadith is also narrated in Tirmidhi Sharif, and it's also quoted by Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi in his Ihya al-Ulum. So Imam Ibn Allah says that Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, La haqqa libni adam illa fi thalatha. That Ibn Adam, the progeny, the descendants of Adam alayhi salam, mankind, has no right except illa fi thalatha, except in three things. And what are those three things? He says, Ta'amun yuqimu bihi sulbuhu. That Nabi Karim alayhi salatu wasalam said that man has a right to have enough sustenance to keep himself nourished and healthy. So basically to eat food, enough to keep yourself nourished and healthy. That is a basic fundamental right of a human being. The second one is thawbun yuwari bihi awratuhu, to have clothing, that enough so that he can cover himself, his awra, and to protect himself from the elements. And the third one is baytun yaqinuhu, accommodation that will shelter him. So the three basic fundamental rights that Nabi Karim alayhi salatu wasalam said that the human has been given are, firstly, to have enough food to nourish and sustain himself. Secondly, to have enough clothing to wear so that he protects himself from the weather, from the elements, and to cover his awrah. And thirdly, baytun yakinnuhu, a place to live, accommodation where he can reside. And then Nabi Karim ﷺ says, فَمَا زَادَ فَهُوَ حِسَابٌ, and anything that is more than that, he will be questioned about. Right? That doesn't necessarily mean that anything more than that is automatically bad, but that doesn't come under the fundamental basic rights that are unquestioned about. These ones will be questioned about, any excess, whether good or bad. Imam Sawi rahmatullah alayhi, in his Hashiyah of Imam Baydawi, Tafsir al-Baydawi, he writes a Hashiyah on the Baydawi Sharif. He writes in the commentary of Surah Al-Ma'un that when you go to buy groceries or clothing, you go shopping, you should buy more of the things that you think your neighbor needs. Because remember Nabi Karim said you have only a certain amount that you won't be questioned about. However, if you go shopping and you buy more items that you don't need yourself, but you think your neighbor might need, or a relative might need, or their children might need, then if you buy those and you grant it to them when they come around your house, or you go around there, you give it to them, then that is permissible because the niyyah behind it is good. And you're not buying it for yourself, you're buying it for other people. So when in the Tafsir Surah Al-Ma'un, which talks about the orphans and the poor, in the Tafsir of that, Imam Sawi writes that you should buy extra stuff more than you need. And in terms of clothes, so nowadays, people purchase, clothes or shoes. If you're going to a wedding, for instance, you buy something that worth £200-300, a pair of shoes, for instance. And then another wedding comes up in a short space of time, and you feel that now that I've already worn those shoes, and my mates and all my community, all my people that I know have seen them, so I feel now that I have to buy another pair just to impress them. So this is what is excess. This is embellishment. This isn't from the necessity. You could just wear the same shoes again. You're not buying the shoes for the people, you're buying them for your need, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you a right to. But anything more than that, then you are in excess. You are going over the necessity into embellishment. So we have to be realistic about these things. That how much do our clothes cost? How much do our shoes cost? How much do we really need? If we have a pair of clothes for winter, a few pairs, a few for summer, that's fine. But as long as it's justified, as long as the clothing that we're buying is justified. So for instance, if you've got a £300 watch, I've never bought a watch in my life, I just use my phone, but if you have got a watch, some people have these fancies and you buy a £300 watch, and then you see another person has a £600 watch, and then you feel that, I need to outdo him, so at least to match him, I'll go and buy the same watch. But what is the purpose? Because your watch is telling the time, and time is time, whether it's on his watch, or that type of watch, or your watch. So it's not going to turn into a time machine just because you spend more money and transport you to another domain or whatever. It's going to keep you in this world. The time will run the same. So just buy the watch that you need, and that should suffice you until you need another one, and obviously you can buy another one. So we need to be realistic about our lifestyles and spending habits. And this is a huge lesson for us today, in this day and age. When people are involved in engrossed in what we call a consumer lifestyle, and they feel compelled that they have to buy the latest fashion of that season, or that they have to get the latest mobile phone because everyone else has got it, it's just come out, I need to buy it, whereas the previous one only came out a year ago and it works perfectly fine. All you need is a software update and you're running the same thing as they are on their phone, but you're going to spend another £1,000. That £1,000 you could spend giving it to a needy person, a poor person, and that will actually benefit you. What is the benefit of buying a phone that is slightly newer than the old one? Of course, if your phone's knackered and it's gone, you can buy another phone. That's within your necessity. But anything more than that is embellishment. So we have to bear in mind what is the necessity and what is the embellishment. And of course, if you're working to feed your family and you're providing for them, then of course that is ibadah, because working for halal provision for yourself and your family and to give to needy persons, that is ibadah. There's a hadith of Bukhari Sharif, Prophet ﷺ says, when a Muslim spends on his family, he gives them nafaqah, it is regarded as sadaqah for him. Some people think, my family, I don't have to really try hard because they're my family, I take them for granted. But what you've got to understand is the most important thing for yourself in this life is your family. They are the ones that you're going to be questioned about first, primarily. That did you provide for their needs before you gave charity? There's people who give charity and they won't give to their family. Their brother might be starving, or not starving in this country, but abroad you have family members who are, not doing well at all. And people have broken relations with them, and they won't give them a penny, but they'll give £1,000, qurbani. That doesn't make sense. Your primary responsibility is your family, because that is sadaqah. Any working that you're doing, whether you're working 14, 16 hours a day, because if that's what you need to survive, that's what you need to do. but the reward that you're getting, because it's sadaqah, you're working for your family. But if you're working to buy that watch or that phone, then no. Then you have to answer for that, because that's an embellishment. And Hazrat Qadri radiallahu ta'ala, who is a Sahabi Rasul, he said that Nabi Karim alayhi salatu wasalam said that to work for a Muslim, to work for himself, his children, and his parents is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But to earn for show or for pride, so that I get more money and I buy better, worldly goods, so that I can impress other people, then that is the devil's way, Nabi Karim alayhi salatu wasalam said. But to earn, to provide for your children, your family, your brothers and sisters, your parents, and to give to the needy, that's pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when you are earning halal income, you are actually in ibadah, if you're working to earn the necessity. But if you're going beyond that, beyond the necessary, and you're working towards embellishment, then you are forsaking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you will be held accountable. We will all be held accountable for that. So the word dunya, because we were talking about the dunya here, it comes from the word dunu in Arabic, which means close, very close, or very low. And one of the reasons that dunya, the word, is called dunya, is because it's very close to the akhirah. Because it might seem to us that it's a long way away, but in terms of, when you look at it over the span of time, from when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the creation, and the end of time, which is eternity, it's like a small speck on the horizon. So it's very close to the akhirah. That's why it's known as dunya, because it's from dunu. And another reason is because it's close to perishing, because in the scheme of things, very soon the dunya will come to an end. So for these two reasons, the dunya is known as dunya. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran Kareem, كُلُّ مَنْ عَلَيْهَا فَانٍ, that everything in it will perish. And this is why it is known as the closed realm, as the perishing realm. So Imam Nawawi is saying that we should turn away from the dunya, but why? He says, فَإِنَّهَا دَارُ نَفَادٍ, that the dunya is a perishing abode, a دَارُ نَفَاد, an abode of perishing. لَا مَحَلُّ إِخْلَادٍ, it's not the eternal abode. Mahal means place, إِخْلَادٍ eternal, it's not the eternal place. It's the perishing abode. And then he says, وَمَنْقَبُ قُبُورٍ, it's the crossing point. لَا مَنْزِلُ قُبُورٍ, it's not the place of joy. What he means by crossing point is, imagine you're traveling on a motorway, and you stop at a service station, and then you decide, I'm just going to stay here and enjoy myself and buy everything overpriced, which is what happens at service stations. But that's not your aim, because remember, you set off from A and you're going to B. The service station was just a pit stop on the way to refuel, to maybe have something to eat, and then carry on. So the dunya is like that service station. It is that point where you rest momentarily before you continue on your actual journey. So it's just a pit stop. There's a hadith in Musnad Ahmad, Imam Ahmad bin Ibn Hanbal radiallahu anhu, he quotes, and Hazrat Abdullah ibn Masud radiallahu anhu, Sahabi Rasul, he narrates that Nabi Karim alayhi salatu wasalam said, إِنَّمَا مَثَلِي وَمَثَلُ الدُّنْيَا كَرَاكِبٍ ظَلَّ تَحْتَ شَجَرَةٍ ثُمَّ رَاحَ وَتَرَكَهَا. That إِنَّمَا مَثَلِي, verily the example, مَثَلُ الدُّنْيَا, the example of this world, and myself. So Nabi Karim alayhi salatu wasalam is referring to himself, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He said, the example of this world and myself is that of a rider who seeks shade, تَحْتَ شَجَرَةٍ, seeks shade under the tree, or a tree. Then he moves on, وَتَرَكَهَا, and he leaves it behind. So similar to the example of the service station, if you're on a journey, in the older days when people travelled on camels and horses and other such animals, they would stop wherever they could and they found shade to shade themselves from the heat. And they would stay under that tree in the shade for a short while the sun moved on. And as soon as the middle of the day, which is the main time when it's really warm, would finish, they would continue on the journey. So that is the dunya, when you stop under a tree for shade, on your journey towards where you're going. That momentary stop, however long it may be, that is, in context to the whole journey, that part is the dunya. And that is what Nabi Karim said, that the dunya is like that, like a rider who stops under a tree for shade and then he continues. Hazrat Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he is a Sahabi Rasul, he says that Nabi Karim shook me by the shoulders and he said, كن في الدنيا كأنك غريب أو آبر سبيل. He says to Hazrat Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu, he said, be in this world as if you were a stranger or a passing traveler. So when you're a passing traveller, you don't go somewhere and then just pitch up a tent and stay there, do you? You travel there, you do your whatever you're doing, and you continue, or you go back. So the beginning of Islam is saying to Abdullah ibn Umar that the world, and he's shaking him by the shoulders to, prompt him and say the world is like a stranger or a passing traveller. So stay in this world as if you are, a passing traveller or a stranger in this world. And then Hazrat Abdullah ibn Umar continues, he adds this portion to the hadith. He says that, and this is his Naseeha to us, he says that if you survive till the evening, do not expect to be alive in the morning. And if you survive in the morning, do not expect to be alive in the evening. And take from your health for your sickness, and take from your life for your death. Meaning that when you are in health, when you're in a young age, normally you're healthier, then make sure you make use of that time wisely and use it for worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and for doing those things that will give Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pleasure. And do that in your health, because when you're sick, you won't be able to do it. Even if you wanted to, it will be too late and you'll regret it. So do those things that you need to do when you've got health for the sickness. And do those things that you need to do in your life for your death, because once you're dead, you won't be able to do it. Even if you do want to come back, Allah will not give you another chance. This is the only chance we have, this life. So do it in this life to prepare for your death. And Imam Sayyid Muhammad bin Alawi al-Haddad al-Shafi'i, rahmatullah alayhi, he's a Sayyid Alim al-Din from Hadramaut in Yemen. The Ba'alawi Sadat, he's one of their ancestors, Imam al-Haddad. He's very famous amongst the Shafi'is. He says in one of his writings, he says, why don't we rely on a world whose reality is حَقِيقَتُهُ كَتَيْفِ فِي سِنَةٍ وَظِلِّ فِي الْمُزَّنِ. That the world is like a brief dream that you have in a brief nap. It's a day or part of a day. It's like when you're in a dream state and it seems like it's going on and on forever and ever. And then you wake up and you gaze at the clock and you realize that only moments have passed, hours at most. And you've only been asleep for a short while. That is the nature of the dunya. You're born and then you die. So when you're born, the adhan is done in one ear and the iqamah in the other. What's the iqamah for? The iqamah is for your salatul janazah. So you've just been born and your iqamah has already been read. And how short is the period between iqamah and salat? Literally seconds. We do every day for 5 prayers a day. Although there is no iqamah for salatul janazah. But this is the iqamah at the beginning of your life. Because that is the period of your life. You do the iqamah, you have that short life and janazah. That's it, briefness of life. The life is done. So Imam Nawawi continues, he says, وَمَشْرَعُ إِنْفِقَامٍ about the dunya. He continues speaking about the dunya. He says, وَمَشْرَعُ إِنْفِقَامٍ لَا مَوْتِنُ دَوَامٍ. So he says that the dunya is a place of separation. And مَوْتِنُ دَوَامٍ, it's not the watan. Mawtinu comes from watan, meaning homeland. It's not the homeland, dawamin for eternity. So it's a place of separation, and it's not the homeland for eternity. And Imam Abu Allah, who remember I mentioned earlier for the Riyadh al-Salihin, he writes a commentary on Riyadh al-Salihin. When commenting on this part of Imam Nawawi's Muqaddamah, he quotes a hadith. He says that Nabi Karim said, Hubbul watani min al-Iman. The love of one's homeland is a part of faith, part of your Iman. However, he interprets this hadith. He says the real homeland for the believer is Jannah. Because the dunya is not the homeland of the believer. The real homeland is Jannah, inshallah. So he says that what Nabi Karim is referring to here, that's his interpretation, that the hubbul watan, the love of the homeland, that's being referred to here, is paradise, is the afterlife. That's the homeland that Nabi Karim is mentioning. And Imam Nawawi goes on to say, فَلِهَذَا كَانَ الْأَيْكَةُ مِنْ أَهْلِهَا هُمُ الْأُبَادِ. So he says, for this reason, فَلِهَذَا كَانَ الْأَيْكَةُ مِنْ أَهْلِهَا هُمُ الْأُبَادِ. For this reason, the people who are awake from the dunya are the ubad, the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the people in this dunya that are awake, they are the ubad. Ubad means servant, comes from abd. So they are the ubad, servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he says, وَأَقَلُ النَّاسِ فِيهَا هُمُ الزُّهَّادِ. And then he says that the most intelligent, أَقَلُ النَّاسِ, the most intelligent amongst them are those who practice asceticism. Zuhad comes from zuhad, meaning to refrain from worldly pleasures. So the people who are ubad, who worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are the people that are awake. But the next category up, the higher category, is those who are not only awake, but they also practice asceticism. So they don't just worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they also refrain from the unnecessary pleasures of the world that they don't need. And remember we mentioned earlier that that will be questioned about, and they don't wish to be questioned about that because they won't have an answer. So they stay away from those things. So they don't just worship Allah, they stay away from the dunya also. But this doesn't mean, however, that we should abandon, working or for lawful provision or for sustenance. However, one should strive to attain halal earnings that will aid us in the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and in gaining closeness to Him. And the meaning of zuhud, asceticism, is to leave off that which will not benefit you in the hereafter. So the person who practices zuhud, asceticism, leaves off those things that do not benefit us in the hereafter. And therefore that person has little desire for the worldly pleasures and gains. And practicing zuhud means that a person should not be attached to this world and not make it his sole concern. Instead, his care should be for the hereafter and to attain salvation in the hereafter. So Imam Haddad, Sayyid Haddad, rahmatullah alayhi, he says regarding the dunya, he says, Inna ila barahaka yamizu biha bayna al-fariqayn ahlul hamki wal fitani. That the only reason that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this dunya. So he says something very similar to what Imam Muhammad ibn Adlan just said about the dunya being two categories. One of those are those who are ubad, and the higher category are those who are also zuhad. So he said more or less the same thing. He said the only reason that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the dunya is to differentiate between the intelligent people and the thoughtless people. So he puts the people, the Muslims especially of this world, into two categories. Those people who are intelligent and they're not only worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they're also refraining from those things that are not necessary for them. And then he mentions that the second category are those who are thoughtless, they're in ghafla. They might believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the last day, but they don't really think about it. And they don't use their understanding of what they know about the deen. They don't think on a day-to-day basis that what am I doing today? At the end of the day, they don't take muhasabah. They don't take stock of what they did during that day. Did they live in accordance to the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or did they follow their own pleasures? And if they did, because we all make mistakes, they then repent from that before going to bed. Because like we said, like the Imam said, you don't know if you're going to be around tomorrow. Take the most advantage of what you have today and prepare for the hereafter. An example of a person who is intelligent and then a person who is thoughtless is the two Umarain. So you've got Hazrat Umar bin al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, the second Caliph of Islam, and you've got Abu Jahl, whose real name was Amr ibn Hisham. So they call him Abu Jahl because Nabi Karim alayhi salatu said he's not the father of wisdom. They used to call him Abu Hikam, the Qurayshi. And Nabi Karim alayhi salatu said he's not Abu Hikam, he's Abu Jahl. He's the father of ignorance. So example of a thoughtless person and an intelligent person is Hazrat Umar, one of the Umar, and the other Umar, Amr bin Hisham, who is the thoughtless person. Nabi Karim alayhi salatu made a dua. He said to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allahumma a'izz al-Islam bi habbil umarain. Oh Allah, guide to Islam the most beloved of the two Umars. So two Umars. Allah said, Nabi Karim said, pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, guide the one who's most beloved of the two to Islam. And then Hazrat Umar bin al-Khattab became Al-Faruq, the decider, the distinguisher, because he distinguished between right and wrong, between good and bad. And Amr bin Hisham, Abu Hikam, he became Abu Jahl. He became the one who is the most ignorant one. So you can see who's the intelligent one here and who is the ignorant one here, even though the ignorant one claimed to be the one who had wisdom. But in reality he didn't, so he became the father of ignorance. And the reason for that is because he didn't recognize the reality of this world and the purpose of his creation. And Nabi Karim said to Mawla Ali Karamallahu Wajhul Kareem, who is the Babul Ilm. Prophet said, Ana Madinatul Ilmi wa Aliyun Babuha. I am the city of knowledge and Ali is its doorway, its gateway. So he is the gateway of knowledge and gnosis, meaning knowing Ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Nabi Karim addressed him, and he said, أولي أن يهدي الله بك رجلا واحدا خير لك من الدنيا وما فيها. That should Allah guide a single person through you, رجلا واحدا, should Allah guide a single person through you, خير لك, that is better for you, من الدنيا وما فيها, better than that what is in the dunya and everything in it. An example of the dunya from the Quran Kareem is Surah Yunus, verse 24. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا مَثَلُ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا كَمَاءٍ أَنزَلْنَاهُ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ فَاخْتَلَطَ بِهِ نَبَاتُ الْأَرْضِ مِمَّا يَأْكُلُ النَّاسُ وَالْأَنْعَامُ حَتَّى إِذَا أَخَذَتِ الْأَرْضُ زُخْرُفَهَا وَزَيَّنَتْ وَظَنَّ أَهْلُهَا أَنَّهُمْ قَادِرُونَ عَلَيْهَا أَتَاهَا أَمْرُنَا لَيْلًا أَوْ نَهَارًا فَجَعَلْنَاهَا حَصِيدًا كَأَن لَّمْ تَغْنَ بالأمس كذلك نفصل الآيات لقوم يتفكرون. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this is quite a long ayah, I read it all in one go, in verse 24, Surah Yunus. He says, the Masal al-Hayat dunya, that the parable or the example, the similitude of the world is like, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is comparing it to. He said it's like water. أَنزَلْنَاهُ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ الدُّنْيَا, that it comes down, is nazil from the sama, from the sky, from the heavens. فَاخْتَلَطَ بِهِ نَبَاتُ الْأَرْضِ, and due to it, the earth's vegetation, so greenery and crops, grow in abundance. مِمَّا يَأْكُلُ النَّاسُ وَالْأَنْعَامُ, and from it, man and cattle eat from that vegetation. حتى إذا أخذت الأرض زخرفها وزينت, to the extent that when the earth has taken on her ornaments and is well beautified, meaning that the crop has grown and is looking beautiful, it's giving zina to the earth. وظن أهلها أنهم قادرون عليها أتاها أمرنا, and at that point the owners, they think that they have qudra over it. They think that they have qudra over it. أمرنا ليلا أو نهارا فجعلناها حصيدا كأن لم تغن بالأمس. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and during the night or during the day, we made it barren as if it had not existed yesterday. بالأمس, yesterday. كذلك نفصل الآيات لقوم يتفكرون. And this is how we explain the verses for those who ponder. So what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying here is that the likeness of the dunya, the similitude of the dunya is like the rain that comes down from the sky onto a patch of land, and on that land crops grow, and then the crops are harvested, or they are taken away, meaning they are destroyed. And at the end of it, the field is as if it was before. So when a farmer, he puts the seeds into the ground, it mixes with the nutrients, the water comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah has given the water the ability to have the ability to grow. Because water in itself has no power. Allah has given it the power. And it mixes with the nutrients and the harvest grows. So that's like a human being. You come into this world, Allah makes you grow. You stay here for a short while and then suddenly you're gone. And that's it, the end. So this is the worldly life. We come into this dunya, we're born, our bodies are nurtured, they grow. We go through various stages of our life. Firstly we're children, then we go through to adolescence, then adulthood, then we come to an old age, if we reach that far, and then we live our life, and then what happens at the end? The end, that's it. It's as if we weren't here in the first place. So that's the worldly life. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, do you really want to gain my displeasure and not follow the purpose of your creation and not become my servant and not be an abd for which you were created for something that's going to perish? Is that what you are disobeying me for? So in the commentary, the exegesis of this ayah, the commentators and Mufassirun have given various examples of the worldly wealth compared to the crops of the world. So an example is that the grass is green. When it's green, it's beautiful. And then when that grass subsides, it withers away, it becomes dull. It loses its color. Likewise is worldly wealth. It's very beautiful at first. And after a period, when the beauty subsides, when it doesn't fulfill the expectations of the individual, then that same wealth becomes like that grass that has decayed. So the comparison being drawn here is between wealth and crop. Is that the green grass initially, is like the wealth initially, it gives you a feeling of security and fulfillment. But after achieving that, the person feels that there is still something missing. Because like the withered grass, it doesn't give him the tranquility and happiness that he was seeking. Because the true contentment is only with the zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Al-Ra'd, verse 28, He says, أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبِ, that truly it is the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ, that the heart finds peace and contentment. تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبِ, the heart finds peace and contentment. Another example of the worldly crops and the worldly wealth, the similarities are that when it rains, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's natural phenomenon like rain, when it rains, on whose permission does it rain? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's permission. So it rains with Allah's izn and Mashiach. Yeah? So that when the rain comes down, it's similar to when you obtain wealth. When you get wealth, do not fool yourself into thinking that it is you who created that wealth, that risk and sustenance. Because think to yourself, did you place the seed in the ground? Did you cause it to grow into a full-grown crop? Did you then harvest it? Did it then come to your shores from another country, most likely? You then purchased it from the shop. You took it home, you mixed it with water, you kneaded the dough, turned it into flour, what we cook with. Then you place it on the heat, and then you consume it. Now throughout that whole process, who gave the water that power to sustain that harvest? Who gave the soil that power? The nutrients. And then how was the ability obtained to transport that wheat from whatever faraway land to where you are living? And then when you purchased it and brought it home, you mixed it with water. Who put the power in that water to knead the dough and to make it into a certain mixture? You then placed it on the fire. Who gave the fire that power to burn and give it heat so that it becomes cooked for you? It's all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This isn't from us. No matter how much money you may have. So this is the second comparison. That when it does rain, another comparison that when it does rain, when we want it to, similarly, when we do not gain any wealth except what Allah has willed, then we get that wealth. So another comparison is that rain is beautiful when it flows. I mean, it's pure. You can do wudu with it, you can do ghusl with it, you can drink it, you can water the plant. You can knead the dough, like I just mentioned. You can do so many things with water when it's flowing. But when that same water, so it's like wealth, worldly wealth, when it flows. You've got the wealth, you pass it on. You don't hoard it, you don't keep it. But if you hoard that wealth, it becomes like stagnant water. So stagnant water, when it's stagnant in one place, it can be harmful to the environment. It can be harmful for human consumption. It can cause diseases like cholera, which can be life-threatening. So that same water, when it came down from the skies, it was pure. It gave you benefit. But when that same water becomes stagnant and still, and starts to obtain bacteria and other diseases, it can become harmful to the human body, the same water. Similarly to wealth, when you have wealth and you give it away in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you spend it on those necessary things, on your family, your relatives, the needy people, the orphans, and you don't hoard it. You don't stick it away in your basement, because that money you will have to answer for. But the money that you spent it as long as it's with good intention, because intention matters in everything. As long as you spent it with intention, that money will benefit you. And it will come back round, you put it into circulation. You're spending it in the way of Allah, you're spending it in halal business, you're spending it on your relatives. So I think I'll leave it there, inshallah. I think the time has come to an end. We've done about 40 minutes. So just basically the gist of what we have been discussing for the last 40 minutes is that what is our purpose of being created? Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send us into this dunya? And from all the ayahs of the Quran that I recited, and all the hadiths of Nabi Kareem alayhi salatu wasalam, and all the sayings and the goals of the Imam, what have we learned? We've learned that the purpose of this dunya is for us to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's for servitude and worship. And secondly, to stay away from those things that we don't need, extra embellishments. Stick to the necessity. And if you do have any extra money, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has favored you, then spend that money in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Spend it on your family, your near family, your brothers and sisters, your children, your wife, your relatives. If your relatives are deserving, you give it to them first. Then you give charity outside. That is the charity begins at home. So I'll leave it there, inshallah. Next week, I think it will be somebody else delivering the lecture. But if I do, inshallah, come back at some point in the near future, we'll continue where I left off. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. Let's do dua. Ameen. آمين. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم وصل عليه. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وقنا عذاب القبر وقنا عذاب الحشر وقنا عذاب الميزان. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. وصلى الله تعالى على رسول الخير خلقه محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين.
I'll be praying that you do come back.
Inshallah.